section, you know, I also critique a little bit. I was like, when I first wrote my script, I was like mad, and I was like, and I was like, oh wait, Gabe's gonna cover a lot of this. All right, erase. I'll just let Gabe say it, and then I'll just say a little bit, and then I'll move on. But essentially, the rewatch of this film definitely hit differently than it did the first time. Gabe and I like texted each other. We're like, ow. I just like feel like crap now, and I usually I feel like, oh, we had some catharsis that didn't take place. So when we initially covered it, we really loved, like, I remember us liking it. We told people to watch it. Like, we had recommended it to people. I remember. So it's just like really interesting to witness.
Sorry, y'all.
And just like a 4 years, like is it how long it's been? About 4 years. Like how much our media analysis classes have cemented to our faces, and our opinions just have like grown and changed, and that's like kind of cool to witness in real time. I think that's something interesting that our show allows us to do, is that like we can recover things and be like, actually, you know, friends, we're going to say the part, we missed it. We missed the line here. Now we're going to correct that with new information. So
we ain't afraid to grow. We ain't afraid to be wrong. Like,
yeah. And I think this is evidence of that. So it's just, thought it was kind of cool, like witnessing like the change that took place, because we really liked this film initially when we first watched it. So, and I think a big influence of this feeling is because of the state of the world. Like, we just have learned so much more in these years and our access to the technology. Like 2018 internet feels different than 2024 internet.
Yeah, for sure.
This watch just wasn't cathartic, and honestly just hit us on the other end of that, where Gabe and I both were just depressed about the world after finishing this film. And like, it's because the horrors of the world right now are so vast and all-encompassing because of the internet. Like, we just see so much in our phones, so that when we rewatched this, it was, seeing this film felt as 2018 as it was.
Yeah, this is pre-TikTok, you know?
Yeah, and it's like, you just like feel you're being fed it a very specific way, and it feels manipulative. Because we're more able to witness and unpack these manipulative things as they're happening because of the way we process media and information now. So it just added to the stress we were already feeling. It wasn't like, oh, cool, I feel like I should go fight stuff. It's like, oh, wow. I just want to go to bed and cuddle my cats. So witnessing the hypocrisy of this town and their violent denial of accountability just felt too close to reality. It, as Gabe said, it's a perpetuator of the harm instead of a point of catharsis and healing from the harm, or like giving us the strength and power to do something differently. It's just perpetuating that feeling. But there was one piece of the film that stand true to the test of time that we've discussed before, which is the perception of goodness and the concept surrounding impact over intention. We have like these characters that are like, America, we are good people. I'm a good person. Even Lily, at multiple times in her white feminism time, was like, I'm a good person. I'm a good person. And I'm not saying she was not a good person, but like the fact that that's what we're centering right now is whether or not people think you're a good person. That's not the priority in all the violence and horrible things that are happening. It should not just be if people are perceiving you as a good person. There is real violence and harm happening to the people I care about and love, and I should be protecting them. We should be working together to protect each other. So that's something that still stood out as being like, we're witnessing the real impact of American harm, self-righteousness, and hypocrisy live. Currently, today, literally on our phones, we are inundated with information at a rate and a scale that is genuinely overwhelming. It's just that this film is pre-TikTok. I think TikTok just changed the world, changed how we perceive things and input. And I think that's honestly probably a big piece of why this just didn't hit how it did in 2020 when we first watched it, which we were just getting TikTok at that point. So America has literally been outed for what it really is right now at a comparatively unprecedented rate. Like the America has been, what they did in this town has happened to America. History, we're very aware
a lot of times of
what the bad guy is, at least more so than we had been in previous. And it's an unprecedented rate because we're unlearning so much and realizing so much about what our government is actually doing. And I mean, at least depending on your algorithm and how plugged in you are to social media. But what we see play out in Assassination Nation is a collective fear of accountability and scapegoating that America is super familiar with, especially the generations that were not raised on this level of connectivity and access to information. And we're seeing like this fight between the older generations and the younger generations in a way that's like really gross and like without care. And like, it's like they all kind of just became the idea of ideas instead of like actual people. But essentially, those that are more attached, the messages that those are more attached to the system will fight to preserve it because it is what they perceive as right, even if that impact is harm on innocent people. And the message I took away from Assassination Nation is that America is the town of hypocrisies and assholes, and we need to be a united front as humans to band together and protect people from harm and deliver accountability. I think that's like, that is what he was maybe trying to say. If someone else took this film, as Gabe said, someone else made it. That was like the theme, is that at the end, in the last 5 minutes where we're supposed to feel some sort of victory and catharsis, it's band together, everyone get your pink hats and march, you know, like it really, like, it was like, let's join together and do it, you know, and that's what the vibe kind of was, but we just didn't get that. Oh, I feel better, you know? I feel like we could do this. I have been given some sort of tool to teach me how.
Like, we could save some of the runtime that was dedicated to over-sexualizing the girls, and instead taking that time to actually build up relatable characters and visual justice.
Lines to characters, like the characters that would be leading the revolution.
That's
and not Willie. It's fine. It's not. But you know what I'm saying? Ultimately, the film also calls to the power of the internet, but in a way that feels as dated as it was, but acknowledges just how uncontrollable the internet really is. There's like a random teen that's on screen for a minute who talks about not sympathizing with the people getting their information spread because older generations are fighting against something that cannot be stopped. It's like for like 2 seconds, and they're like waiting for her to explain it, and then just like it goes into something totally different. But
you gotta make time for the butts.
Yeah. And the reason a government, a collection of fossils, fears TikTok. I'm just like my fifth like rant about this. Honestly, I like went back and rewatched some of our clips, and I was like, I can't get off this hill because like it's so evident that like the fear of the internet and all. There's danger in it, actually,
of accessibility to information.
But the danger, as you said, and the power of the internet is something that like the older generations just fear so much because we're being fed information and like we're able to like see pattern recognition. Friends, we have a whole generation of neurodivergent humans who one of the diagnosing factors is pattern recognition. And we're being fed patterns and information, and we're able to see like all the hypocrisy and the genuine just like blatant lies that are being perpetuated by our government. We're like, no, you're wrong, friend. Like what? Not even friend at this point. There's a lot of people who I just don't like fossils. At this point. Fossils. But ultimately,
fossil.
It's literally like it's a whole thing, but. We are learning what this country really is, and we're learning who the real bad guys are, and they really don't want us to do that. This is like my fifth rant about it. They're reacting to our protests, our call-outs, our delivering of accountability, very similar to how the suburban town did in the film, with violence, self-righteousness, and ignorance. They're like, what do you mean, democracy? We're the good guys. They're
literally saying not to have democracy anymore.
They're like, yes, once I say not to have democracy anymore, and the other side's like, the only reason you should vote for me is because they say we're not going to have democracy anymore. And it's like, if I'm voting, fascism is when you don't have a choice in who you're voting for. And if we're given two abhorrently horrible choices, isn't that just, we're already there. It's fine. Whatever. It's fine. It's not. But ultimately, what I'm saying is that, like, the older generations, as they said, they're so scared of the internet and everything it has and the access to information. And they're the mob of violent, angry townspeople allied with the police attacking these people, like, who are literally just living their lives. And they're just like, nope. The next section I'm going to cover is data security and privacy. Much like the snarky teen said in the film, privacy's dead. And we might as well accept that. The American government only cares about our privacy and data protection as long as they can be the ones to exploit it. And I'm going to cover a little bit like, yeah, we don't have this releasing of information where it's like you're getting small town doxing adventure. Like you're not like, they're not sending, being like, oh, this person's with this person, look, mob them with Salem witch trial, like antics. Like it's not that. We are having all of that data instead fed to companies and corporations and being like, your data privacy is not, it doesn't exist ultimately because there's only so many companies that you can work with and they're all working together, sending your data everywhere. So I read some articles about Facebook, specifically Meta, and the way that they share our data, and it's super gross, unsurprisingly. So essentially, well, we know we have to get rid of TikTok because they're funneling data. And it's like Meta and Amazon specifically have been doing that for a long time. It only is a problem if it doesn't directly benefit wallets. So Meta's use of tracking and the lobbying against other social media platforms is an example of this. While it is not as flashy and dramatic as videos being shared to our neighbors or our text being leaked to people we know, our data is being shared with thousands of companies every day. And in an article titled, "Each Facebook user is monitored by thousands of companies" by The Markup and written by John Keegan, they delve into the extensive scale of data tracking by Facebook, well, Meta specifically, because they own both, as revealed by a study conducted by Consumer Reports. This study used data of 709 volunteers who shared their Facebook data archives, finding that on average, participants' data was sent to Facebook by 2,230 companies, with some having over 7,000 companies involved. The study, supported by The Markup, highlighted server-to-server tracking, where data goes directly from a company server to Meta servers, a form of tracking typically invisible to users. So it's essentially when you're like, you can give my information to companies so that they know what I want to buy. That's the exchange that's taking place, essentially. So essentially, although the study sample may not represent general U.S. population due to its like volunteer status, like people had to volunteer to have their data checked in order to do this.
It's so funny because they don't volunteer to have it sent out.
Nope. And a lot of time, Meta specifically, and like other companies like it, are being like called out because a lot of these things, in terms of like giving permissions to Meta and other companies to track this data, if you don't want them to, there's like intentional, barriers that they'll create essentially, so that you can complain, but like they either just won't, you'll feel like you did something and it doesn't matter because they're not going to change what they're doing.
And everything's a hurdle to get.
And they do that on purpose so that you don't get to what you're trying to do. They're making it hard on purpose. So Meta defends its transparency tools, but Consumer Reports pointed out issues such as unclear data provider identities and ignored opt-out requests. So you can opt out and they still just ignore those requests, that you can pick up on the fact that they're ignoring them and call them out on that, and then they just don't answer your correspondence or like suppress your account. Prominent companies like LiveRamp, Home Depot, Walmart, and Amazon were frequently found in sharing data with Meta. So Amazon, one of the largest data collectors that exist, is also sharing with Meta, another extremely large data collector. And they're all just like, if you can't see the screen because you're listening visually or you're listening through your ears, I was doing like amalgamation mosh pit with my hands. So that's what I was trying to convey, is that they're all working together. They're all just buddy-buddy, you know. And the study examined two types of data collected, custom audiences and events. So custom audiences involve advertisers uploading customer lists, while events include interactions like visiting a website or physical store, often tracked via Meta's pixels or SDKs. This form of tracking can reveal sensitive activities such as dialing suicide hotlines or booking medical appointments. So things like BetterHelp, for example. I don't want to ruin BetterHelp for everybody, but they're one of the companies that but like therapy is hard to get. I get it. Yeah. People need therapy. Absolutely. But BetterHelp is one of the companies that like sells data specifically that could be used against you down the line, because they're like, hey, this person opened up about their feelings and they're maybe not good for this job. Or whatever, like, you know, they share the information with other companies as well as the government, and like that information could be used against you down the line. We're all like doing this like trust experience, which is not what we should be doing with data and the government, where we're like, it's fine until it's not. Like they say that it's going to be chill. Yeah, but it's like, even if you don't, stuff can be used against you It's fine. But yeah, they can send information such as if you are booking medical appointments, etc. And to view data shared with Facebook, users can access their data through Facebook settings through a process. But the process is really cumbersome and may leave users with lingering questions due to the very vague identification of many companies. Like, it's really hard to tell where your data is actually going and to like fight back against that because it's just like this exchange. Consumer reports and privacy advocates recommend several policy changes to improve data privacy, such as data minimalization strategies, enhanced powers for authorized agents to act on behalf of customers or consumers, so you can have someone like fight for you that isn't on their payroll, increased ad transparency, and better readability of data made available by Meta. So they're like, make it easier for people to understand so they can know what they're selling themselves off to. And they're like, they're not going to do that. It's like telling, I'm not going to get into another. It's like, but you're telling the person doing the harm to monitor the harm. That's not, they're not going to monitor the harm. Why would they? Because then they can't, they'd have to stop doing harm. They don't want to. Common sense. It's fine. These recommendations aim to shift the burden of privacy protection from consumers to businesses and legislators. But despite Meta's commitment, in quotes, to evolving data practices, the absence of federal policy law limits consumer options in most states. When it comes to other kinds of data leaks, apparently there have been 14 major data leaks in 2024 alone, including Ticketmaster, JP Morgan and Chase, Dell, Dropbox. This was my favorite. The U.S. government. Trello, and Bank of America. So there's been a ton of data leaks. Last year, there's like even more. It kind of goes through like all the data leaks in recent years. And it's an upsetting amount of things. And I found an article on how to get Facebook to not track you. It's pretty convoluted, but it does give you kind of like a step-by-step way to do it. The best thing to do, and if a lot of people are doing that specifically with like AI and like Meta specifically going to pull all user data to funnel through and train AI systems. Lots of artists and creatives have been pulling their content from Meta platforms and putting them on other platforms. So like for artists, they're using Kara, which is like dedicated to not using data ever to be funneled through AI, and also like don't have like ad traffic and other kind of tracking based things that Meta does. To the point where like they became the number 5 social media app overnight. But it's specifically for artists. So it's funneled in that way where it's not like for everybody necessarily. I guess it could develop into that if they maintain their commitment to protecting against AI. But the best thing you could do is leave those social media platforms for ones who do like make it not profitable for them to exploit you. Kind of like what we were saying last week, where it all comes down to money. And coming for their money. So to leave Facebook and make it so that they aren't the industry standard, Adobe also has recently been flagged as funneling all their things through AI. So you have to like find other programs that aren't doing that are open source, that are publicly accessible. We all have to work together to like train each other on that, essentially. So that's the next step to take in fighting data collection from big companies. It is hard. I'm not going to lie to you. There's another article and section of my section where I was kind of like thinking about like what happened in this town and how it specifically targeted young people. And what I found in some of my searches was that unfortunately there are countless threats to young people on the internet, but the one major one is the digitization of important records and assets that are not being protected appropriately by institutions, essentially. So apparently young people are targets of hacking and data leaks, especially recently, because they're the longest to be victim of these data leaks. Essentially, people are targeting them specifically, like children, because when you steal their identity, you'll be able to do that for a really long time because they're kids. So in an NPR article titled "Hackers Are Targeting a Surprising Group of People, Young Public School Students," they unpack a cyber attack in which many young people's data was released/stolen in February of 2023. Minneapolis Public School experienced a severe cyber attack where hackers stole and released sensitive data, including social security numbers, school security details, and information on sexual assaults and psychiatric holds after the district refused to pay a ransom that they had. The breach affected over 105,000 students with data that included health records and privileged information now accessible online. This incident reflects a growing trend of cyber attacks targeting K-12 schools as they are increasingly rely on technology. And these data breaches can have long-lasting consequences for students, including identity theft and misuse of sensitive personal information. Essentially, children's identity information is particularly valuable to hackers since it can be exploited for years before being detected, and schools store extensive data beyond just grades, such as medical histories and disciplinary records, which can be used by cybercriminals to cause significant harm. So the Minneapolis attack exposed the vulnerabilities of school data storage practices, and advocates note that specifically BIPOC students, who are the ones disproportionately disciplined because of how we police our students in schools, are especially at risk, and that stolen records can impact students' futures, affecting college applications, job prospects, and legal outcomes. Kind of like how Better Health can tell the government if you're depressed. They're having records of everything you did when you were a child. And it doesn't even like touch on like credit, which is like a whole other issue where you're destroying their ability to access futures when the country as a whole prioritizes credit as like the method to having financial stability. So there's like parents who are speaking that like the district itself is not doing enough to heal this wound that is taking place, because they're like, they offered free credit monitoring and guidance on preventing identity theft, but the steps were not like explained in a way that made sense to the parents, and also just like weren't enough. Like these children's entire identities were stolen and are going to be manipulated and used, and like someone needs to like step in and like wipe a clean slate for them. That like if it wasn't them, there needs to be like governmental measures in place to, or like like something that can happen to like fixes that for these children, because that's going to be a problem, especially as more we digitize and these records, and then inadvertently like, don't protect these children. And that's like a big theme of this film is that adults are not protecting the kids at all and don't care about them. Like it's a whole thing. But this actual real life scenario is something that's like kind of like representative of that, like not lack of care in like this very sensitive and important information of these students, and like they just did not protect them. And this is nothing to do with doxing, which is a whole other can of worms to unpack, but it does pose a more threatening image of the digital age, especially when in the hands of a generation like the ones who are in positions of power who just don't understand what the internet is. Not being able to put in the necessary protections that would make the internet a safe place in the future, instead just wanting to censor things, and like they're putting all their effort in the wrong place because they don't understand what the internet actually is. They don't understand how the internet works, and therefore can't actually protect the younger generations from harm, and instead just perpetuate it. So I'm going to find some resources that are less depressing to put at the end of my blog so that you can have something to like work towards, because there definitely is like, there's people doing things, not necessarily there are people doing internet protection, but like if we're talking about protecting young people and futures of society and like each other and building community and to fight oppressive systems, like I got tons of resources on that. So you can have some next steps there.
Yeah, I think it's like, especially with, the generations that are in charge, everything was paper. Everything was filed away and inaccessible. And now we have generations whose entire existence is on the internet. Like from the moment they were brought into even before they were brought into the world, like we have digital, like ultrasounds, like that, those things are like, it's an entirely different world. And so if you don't have the information or knowledge of like how those things function or the impact of it, it's hard for you to ensure that it's safe. Because it doesn't even occur to you what the possibilities are for danger. So absolutely. And what happened at that school is just clearly shows that the people in charge did not understand what digitizing those records would mean. And they needed the government of that place needed to have more funding for those schools so that they could appropriately protect and like have security for those records, and they did not. So it's a failing on the government end for protecting those kids from what happened, and will probably continue to happen in an exorbitant amount
if we continue along this line of like the people in charge not understanding the priorities that need to take place within protecting kids. So
yeah, and all that to say, like, there were aspects of this film that like absolutely are true, right? There are some, like I said, comments that were made, and Levinson did say like that he sought the wisdom of the young people that he was working with, so maybe some of those lines that really hit were from them, and there's could be something to be said about that. I just think like these stories absolutely need to be told. It's not like it's old news, right?
Yeah.
It is something that like is important. I just think like the way that we approach the content, and if we are setting out to confront issues that are happening on screen, we can't continue to contribute to them. Like, like there just has to be some care given into it, and it's not. And so you're just like perpetuating the harm, and you are no better than the people that we're seeing on screen that you're telling us like, and clearly are the villain. But it's supposed to be us, right? It's supposed to be this reflection of America as a whole. But it was just like, you're on a soapbox that you have no business being on. And then you're like, it felt very politician.
Yeah.
You're lecturing us while doing the same thing, and profiting off of the industry that's doing those things.
And yeah, it's all about like who you give the microphone to, right? And someone else could have told the story, and like if you want the story to be told, uplift the people who could tell the story better than you. And that's not what he did. He said, I can tell the story, it's fine, I'll do it. And didn't account that all of his biases were going to be portrayed on screen, and that his centering of the characters that he centered and the decentering of those that he didn't, and then all the harm that he put on all those bodies, like he should not have been the one carrying this message. He should have, if he believed in it, he should have uplifted a different creator to do it.
Yeah, exactly. Like use like the resources you have. Yeah, and like it's not enough to have these people on screen. Like, and I think that's a big part of media literacy that people don't always understand. It is not enough that you have trans representation, right? It's like, what are you telling with those stories? Is this harmful? Are you creating narratives that could hurt someone who is discovering that about themselves? And parts of it are you're letting yourself be like letting them have a mouthpiece for it, right? Like talking about the hate of the politician who was doing all that harm, and the like it coming back around. But even that is like toxic too. Like I hate that narrative of like homophobic politician is actually gay and that's why they're harmful. Like, no, sometimes people are straight and harmful. Sometimes they're not. They don't need to be in the closet and trying to suppress. Like, you don't need to make me try to feel bad for them, which is why I was like, Bex was right. Bex was like, I don't feel bad. That person would not blink if I was murdered or like my life was ruined, and actually would be celebrating it. So I'm going to do the same for them. That was like the valid part of that. But I think like the existence of that narrative was already a problem. So yeah, there are some hits, but it's a lot of misses just because of the package that it's in, because it is Levinson's story. And I really wanted to like it a lot more. And I remember having done that, and in this, and I do think like I'll re-listen to our last episode because I do think there was some critique there. I do think we were like, this feels like it like you're ranting to me, like what is happening? And again, this is before Euphoria. This is before he really took, and then before The Idol, which is like really he was telling on himself. And The Weeknd, he was telling on The Weeknd, but I only give Weeknd some props because he has been putting his own money into the cause. So I won't yell at him. He gets he gets a pass for a month. Then they'll come back around. But let us know what you think about Assassination Nation, what you think about Sam Levinson. I hope you check out Petra Collins' work and see how clear that inspiration is. Let us know what you think. If there's recommendations for films or series or books that do this in a better way, I'd love to hear it. We will be covering a bunch of just like teen drama woes for this series, which should be fun. And we made some discoveries while like assembling this series together. And so I hope you have a fun time watching the films and then unpacking them with us, and always wearing your media literacy glasses, because it's super important to know, especially in this day and age when our media is under attack and our access to information and to knowledge about what we're being given, right? Like media literacy is so incredibly important right now. Like you should be questioning and unpacking and critiquing everything that comes through a screen, or like whether it's audible, visual, what like reading, whatever it is, you really need to be aware of and asking yourself some core questions about like, who is this for? What is it doing? What's its intent? You know, like
who wrote it? What's their bias?
Yeah, because that, like, I think like that's really going to make or break a lot of the things that are coming down the way, is how aware we are of the media that we're ingesting and the impact that it can have, because a film is never just a film, right? A book is never just a book. A song is never just a song. Everything means something. It's just a matter of whether or not you peeped it. So yeah, don't get married.
Still at your kids. And hopefully your kids are okay.
Or they'll steal your kid's identity. That's really scary. Honestly, that's terrifying.
Yeah.
Those poor babies. All right, well, bye.
Bye.